Drew Kane, the most despised character on General Hospital. And there's good reason. Drew Kane has become the most universally hated character on ABC's General Hospital. And frankly, this has been brewing for quite some time. As the congressman cutthroat himself, Drew has methodically made enemies out of nearly everyone in Port Charles through his relentless scheming, self-serving ambitions, and callous disregard for those around him, particularly his own daughter, Scout. The question that's been on every General Hospital fan's mind isn't just whether Drew deserves his fate, but rather what that fate will ultimately be. As he continues to spiral deeper into infamy, the show's writers have positioned him squarely in the center of one of daytime television's most compelling whodunit mysteries. Who shot Drew Kane? And with recent developments pointing to Curtis Ashford as the mastermind behind the attack, Drew's days in Port Charles may be numbered. The fall of a once redeemable character. When Cameron Mathison took over the role of Drew Kane from the late Billy Miller in 2021, there was genuine potential for the character to evolve as a complex, multidimensional figure. However, the trajectory has been nothing short of catastrophic. Rather than developing Drew as a character with genuine depth and internal conflict, the writers at General Hospital have opted to transform him into a one-dimensional villain who seems to operate purely on greed, manipulation, and spite. The contrast between Billy Miller's portrayal, which showed Drew as emotionally reserved yet principled, particularly in his connections with Sam, Curtis, and Monica, and Mathison's version is staggering. Cameron Mathison's Drew came out of his reunion with Jason fundamentally changed in all the wrong ways. Instead of being the principled, distant family member Billy Miller portrayed, Mathison's Drew became aggressively focused on Jason, inserting himself into situations that warranted his absence. Once he entered into a relationship with Carly and Jason returned to Port Charles, the character transformed into an almost unrecognizable figure, calculating, manipulative, and increasingly cruel. Fans have noted that rather than earning the disdain directed at him through compelling narrative arcs, Drew simply became unlikable through lazy writing that stripped away any nuance or redemptive qualities. The catalyst for hatred, a character written into irredeemable territory. The explosion of fan hatred toward Drew reached its peak following one particularly egregious act of psychological abuse that has united the fanbase in their desire to see him removed from the show entirely. In a moment of calculated cruelty, Drew deliberately told Rick Lansing that Michael no longer wanted his children, Wiley and Amelia, because he had a new baby, doing so with full knowledge that Wiley could overhear his words. This wasn't a momentary lapse in judgment. It was premeditated emotional abuse designed to wound both the child and his father. The response from General Hospital's social media was instantaneous and overwhelming. Fans expressed their fury in a collective roar, with comments ranging from "he is literal human waste" to demands that this character be permanently removed from the show. This single incident crystallized what many fans had been feeling for months. Drew Kane isn't just a villain to be hated within the narrative of General Hospital. He's become a character so poorly written and despicable that continued viewership feels like punishment. The writers created a situation where audiences don't tune in hoping Drew will be redeemed or that his schemes will be thwarted in a satisfying way. Instead, fans are watching with the grim hope that someone will eliminate him entirely. The court battle and custody complications. Much of Drew's villainy has centered around his relentless pursuit of custody over Scout Quartermain Kane, his biological daughter. Rather than recognizing the toxic environment he's creating, Drew has taken extraordinary measures to isolate Scout from her extended family. He implemented a restraining order preventing Alexis Davis, Christina Davis, Molly Davis-Lansing, Danny Morgan, and Rocco Falconeri from coming within 500 feet of Scout. These orders were ostensibly meant to protect Scout, but in reality, they served Drew's narcissistic need to control the narrative and punish those who have opposed him. The most damning detail in this custody battle is Drew's strategic appointment of Willow Tate as Scout's legal guardian should anything happen to him. Willow, who is currently one of the top suspects in the investigation into who shot Drew, is a major murder suspect in her own right. In appointing her as Scout's guardian, Drew demonstrated a breathtaking level of recklessness that prioritized his desire to keep Scout away from her biological family over her actual safety and well-being. The irony is exquisite. In trying to protect Scout from people who genuinely love her, Drew placed her under the guardianship of a woman who is increasingly being implicated in his attempted murder. The shooting investigation. Curtis emerges as the mastermind. After months of speculation surrounding who pulled the trigger on Drew Kane, the mystery appears to have been solved. Curtis Ashford, played by Donald Turner, has been revealed as the mastermind orchestrating Drew's shooting. During intense police questioning, Curtis experienced a damning flashback revealing that he met with mob figure Selena Wu and offered her $1 million to kill Drew Kane that very night. This wasn't a crime of passion or momentary rage. It was a calculated murder-for-hire plot. The timing and context of Curtis's decision to hire a hitman speaks volumes about the depths of Drew's influence on Port Charles. Curtis, a principled man who has always tried to operate with integrity, was so desperate to stop Drew's interference in his daughter's life that he resorted to extreme measures. The fact that someone like Curtis felt compelled to take such drastic action serves as a damning indictment of Drew's character and behavior. Willow as suspect and guardian, a dangerous combination. While Curtis has been implicated as the hiring party, questions remain about Willow's direct involvement in the shooting itself. Willow was briefly the prime suspect in the investigation, with multiple red flags pointing toward her as a possible shooter. She had no solid alibi for the night of the shooting. She was missing from her hospital shift. She returned soaking wet from the rain, and her extreme distress upon hearing about the shooting seemed performative to some observers. Moreover, Willow had every motive to want Drew dead. He had destroyed her marriage to Michael, seduced her, then betrayed her by having an affair with her mother, Nina, before proposing and then abandoning her. The irony of Willow's position as Scout's legal guardian is compounded by the disturbing reality that she herself is deteriorating mentally. Years of suppressed trauma from her time in the cult Dawn of Day, combined with the psychological devastation of losing custody of her own children, appeared to be bubbling to the surface. Willow's childhood trauma was never properly addressed or treated, and the combination of these unresolved issues with her increasingly unhinged behavior suggests she's a ticking time bomb. She previously stalked Daisy Gilmore Corinthos, though this was never conclusively proven. And recent spoilers hint that Willow might even flee town with Wiley and Amelia should she discover that the police are zeroing in on her. In placing Scout under Willow's guardianship, Drew may have unwittingly put his daughter in the care of someone who is unraveling psychologically. Cameron Mathison's career moves and Drew's uncertain future. One of the most significant developments surrounding Drew Kane's future came when it was announced that Cameron Mathison would be hosting a new game show called Beat the Bridge for the Game Show Network, set to premiere in June. This immediately sparked speculation among General Hospital fans that the actor might be exiting the show to focus on his new hosting duties. However, Mathison quickly took to Instagram to address these concerns directly, stating simply no when asked if he was leaving General Hospital. Despite Mathison's reassurance that he's remaining with the show, the question of how long Drew will actually remain in Port Charles continues to dominate fan discussions. The actor's Instagram response doesn't necessarily mean that Drew Kane himself will survive what appears to be an increasingly dangerous situation. Soap operas have a long history of creating exits for characters in ways that don't require actors to leave the show entirely. And the current storyline provides ample opportunities for Drew to meet a tragic end while Mathison continues his work on General Hospital in other capacities, or simply takes on new story assignments. The possible fates, death, prison, or a medical coma. As fans speculate about what will ultimately happen to Drew Kane, three primary scenarios have emerged as possibilities. The first and most dramatically satisfying for the fanbase would be Drew's death. Given that Curtis hired a professional hitman to kill him and Willow was briefly suspected as a direct participant in the shooting, Death certainly seems like a realistic outcome. However, Drew's survival of the initial shooting suggests that his demise, if it comes, might be the result of a secondary event rather than the original assassination attempt. Fans have noted that in General Hospital's long history, characters frequently survive multiple attempts on their lives only to meet unexpected ends through other means. The second possibility is that Drew will end up in prison. The evidence against him is mounting. His illegal surveillance operations, his bribery of a judge in the custody case involving Michael and Willow, his manipulation of witnesses, and his numerous other crimes could all come to light. In fact, speculation exists that Drew himself ordered Judge Herron to be bribed to award custody to Michael, which would constitute criminal conspiracy. Should the truth emerge about all of Drew's schemes and illegal activities, a lengthy prison sentence would be entirely justified and narratively satisfying. The third scenario that's been discussed is that Drew could end up in a prolonged medical coma. Soap operas often use this device to remove characters from active storylines while leaving the door open for future returns or dramatic reveals. Given that Drew was already shot twice in the back and has survived, another medical crisis could plausibly land him in a comatose state. This would effectively remove him from Port Charles while allowing the narrative to continue exploring the ramifications of his actions and the healing of his victims. The broader question, redemption or removal. What makes the Drew Kane situation so compelling from a television perspective is that the writers have created a scenario where virtually no redemption arc seems plausible. Fans have made it clear through their overwhelming response that they don't want to watch Drew's gradual reformation or his attempt to rebuild his life. They want him gone. The character has committed so many heinous acts, from his cruel manipulation of a child to his criminal schemes to his serial betrayals of those who cared about him, that a redemption arc would feel forced and inauthentic. General Hospital's showrunner Frank Valentini and the writers have made a deliberate choice to lean into Drew's villainy rather than attempt redemption. This is actually a sophisticated narrative choice. Rather than trying to rehabilitate an unpopular character, they've doubled down on making audiences despise him, which makes him exceptionally effective as a villain. In a show with a long history of memorable antagonists, Drew Kane has achieved a distinction of being perhaps the most universally reviled character in recent memory, not because he's complex or fascinating, but because the writing has made him repugnant in ways that feel personal and cruel. Conclusion: a character whose time has come and gone. As of December 2025, the General Hospital narrative is accelerating toward a resolution for the Drew Kane problem. New evidence is emerging in the investigation, with Curtis's involvement becoming increasingly clear to authorities. The question is no longer whether Drew will face consequences for his actions, it's what form those consequences will take. Will the man who poisoned his relationship with every person in Port Charles, who manipulated his own daughter, and who hired a hitman for himself ultimately meet his end through one of these three fates? Regardless of which outcome comes to pass, one thing is certain: General Hospital's fanbase has rendered its verdict on Drew Kane. He is a character whose time on the show has become a narrative liability rather than an asset. Cameron Mathison may be continuing in his role on the soap opera, but the question isn't whether the actor will stay. It's whether audiences can bear to keep watching the character he plays. As the investigation into who shot Drew continues to unfold, and as new evidence surfaces, the countdown to Drew's exit from Port Charles appears to have already begun. Whether that exit comes through death, imprisonment, or unconsciousness, the General Hospital fanbase is united in anticipation of the day when they can finally say goodbye to Congressman Cutthroat for good. Next, we will learn about the shocking developments surrounding Detective Nathan West and the explosive situation involving Charlotte Casadini that could shake Port Charles to its very core. The tension in Port Charles has reached unprecedented heights as Detective Nathan West finds himself at the center of an incredibly delicate and morally complex situation that could have far-reaching consequences for multiple families in the community. According to the latest General Hospital spoilers and updates, Nathan may soon be forced into a position where he must arrest Charlotte Casadini, the young daughter of the notorious and currently fugitive Valentine Casadini. This dramatic turn of events appears to be intricately connected to a carefully orchestrated strategy devised by ADA Justine Turner, who has demonstrated time and again that she's willing to employ unconventional and potentially controversial tactics to achieve her prosecutorial objectives. Valentine's desperate situation. The current circumstances surrounding Valentine Casadini have become increasingly dire and complicated with each passing day. Now that Valentine has successfully escaped custody and remains at large somewhere in the Port Charles area or beyond, law enforcement officials are scrambling to develop effective strategies to recapture him before he can disappear completely or cause additional damage. The authorities are acutely aware that they're dealing with a highly trained former WSB agent who possesses extensive resources, international connections, and the intelligence necessary to evade capture indefinitely if he chooses to do so. The urgency to apprehend Valentine has intensified dramatically following his daring escape, and there's growing concern among officials that he might need to be transferred to a facility even more secure and isolated than Steinmauer Prison. Jack Brennan, who authorized the controversial decision to transfer Valentine to the mainland, must now be experiencing profound regret and second-guessing his judgment call. That fateful decision inadvertently provided Valentine with the perfect opportunity to execute his escape plan, allowing him to break free from his restraints during transport and make a dramatic leap from the jet that was carrying him to his destination. The investigation intensifies. Detective Nathan West has been working tirelessly to coordinate the manhunt efforts and keep his partner Dante Falconeri fully informed about every development in this rapidly evolving situation. The two detectives have maintained constant communication as they navigate the complex web of evidence, witness statements, and strategic considerations that define this high-profile case. Both Nathan and Dante are seasoned investigators who understand the immense pressure they're under to produce results quickly, especially given the public attention this case has attracted and the potential political ramifications for the Port Charles Police Department. The latest briefing from Ada Turner has introduced a controversial new element into the investigation that has left both detectives feeling uncomfortable about the ethical implications of what they're being asked to do. Turner's proposed strategy involves using Charlotte Casadini as a strategic pawn in an elaborate trap designed to lure Valentine out of hiding. The fundamental premise behind this plan relies on one incontrovertible truth that everyone in Port Charles understands. Valentine would sacrifice everything, including his own freedom and potentially his life, to protect his beloved daughter Charlotte, whom he treasures above all else in this world. Charlotte faces serious consequences. The mechanism through which Ada Turner plans to execute this strategy involves pursuing criminal charges against Charlotte for her documented involvement in the unauthorized break-in at Professor Henry Hank Dalton's research laboratory. This incident, which occurred several weeks ago and resulted in significant property damage and the theft of sensitive research materials, has left a clear evidence trail that points directly to Charlotte's participation. While many community members have expressed sympathy for Charlotte given her young age and the difficult circumstances surrounding her family situation, ADA Turner appears determined to prosecute the case to its fullest extent. According to the most recent General Hospital spoilers circulating through Port Charles, Nathan West is preparing to make an arrest in connection with criminal activity, and all signs point toward Charlotte being the target of this law enforcement action. The arrest itself would serve multiple purposes within Turner's broader strategic framework. First, it would establish concrete legal leverage that could be used in negotiations with Valentine should he eventually be apprehended. Second, it would create a public spectacle that would be impossible for Valentine to ignore, particularly if news coverage emphasizes Charlotte's vulnerable position and the serious legal jeopardy she faces. The high-stakes gamble. ADA Turner's calculation appears to be that Valentin's paternal instincts will override his survival instincts when confronted with images of his daughter being led away in handcuffs or sitting alone in a holding cell awaiting arraignment. Turner is betting that if they stage Charlotte's arrest as a highly visible public event, complete with media coverage and dramatic courtroom proceedings, Valentin will be compelled to emerge from hiding and offer to surrender himself in exchange for Charlotte's immediate release and immunity from prosecution. The psychological warfare aspect of this strategy cannot be overstated, as it directly targets what Turner perceives as Valentin's greatest vulnerability and most exploitable weakness. However, there are significant risks and uncertainties inherent in this approach that could ultimately undermine its effectiveness. Valentin Casadini is an exceptionally intelligent and calculating individual who has spent decades navigating dangerous situations and outmaneuvering adversaries who underestimated his strategic capabilities. There's a very real possibility that Valentin will quickly recognize Turner's gambit for what it truly is and refuse to take the bait. He might calculate that the prosecution's case against Charlotte is fundamentally weak, particularly now that Professor Dalton is no longer available to provide testimony or serve as the primary complainant in the matter. Strategic considerations and complications. Despite these potential complications and the considerable uncertainty about whether the strategy will ultimately prove successful, ADA Turner appears willing to accept these risks and move forward with her plan. From Turner's perspective, this aggressive approach offers several tactical advantages that make it worth pursuing regardless of the outcome. Most importantly, placing Charlotte under official law enforcement custody and supervision would effectively neutralize any plans Valentin might be formulating to abduct his daughter and flee the country with her. By keeping Charlotte under constant police protection during this critical period, authorities can ensure that Valentin cannot simply snatch her away and disappear into whatever underground network he's currently utilizing to evade capture. The entire situation is generating enormous amounts of tension, frustration, and controversy throughout Port Charles as residents debate the ethical implications of using a young girl as bait in a law enforcement operation. Community leaders, child advocacy groups, and legal experts have begun weighing in on the matter, with some arguing that Turner's tactics represent an unconscionable exploitation of a vulnerable minor, while others maintain that extraordinary circumstances sometimes require extraordinary measures. ADA Turner, for her part, seems determined to cut through all the political noise and philosophical debates to achieve a swift resolution to this chaotic situation before it spirals further out of control or claims additional victims. Carly's dangerous secret. Meanwhile, amid all this turmoil and uncertainty, Carly Corinthos finds herself navigating an increasingly treacherous situation that could explode at any moment if her carefully guarded secrets are exposed. Carly must somehow maintain the facade of innocence and ignorance while concealing the truth about her covert partnership and collaboration with Valentin from Jack Brennan and other authorities who are actively investigating the escape. This deception requires Carly to engage in a delicate balancing act where she must appear appropriately concerned and cooperative with the investigation while simultaneously hiding evidence of her involvement in facilitating Valentin's plans. Carly may attempt to deflect suspicion by publicly expressing regret and remorse for her previous suggestion that Valentin be transferred to the mainland, positioning herself as an unwitting participant whose well-intentioned recommendation was manipulated by Valentin for his own purposes. She might seek reassurance from Brennan that he doesn't hold her responsible for Valentin's escape, using emotional appeals and genuine-seeming vulnerability to convince him that she's just another victim of Valentin's deception rather than an active accomplice. This performance will require all of Carly's considerable skills at manipulation and misdirection, as any slip-up or inconsistency in her story could result in her facing serious criminal charges as an accessory to Valentin's escape and ongoing flight from justice.